Apparently, this is Britain's most Roman town.
Welcome to the city of Chester, home to Britain's largest Roman amphitheatre and the only Roman rock-cut shrine in Western Europe that remains in its original location. It was clearly a Roman settlement of great importance, but what makes this one different to any other?
Join us as we discover the story behind Deva Victrix, Britain's largest Roman fortress.
Hi, it's Lucy and Ellie from Roman Found, and today we're with Katie from Helpful History.
And we're here in the place that has been dubbed Britain's most Roman city.
So why choose this location to create one of the most powerful army camps in the entire Roman province of Britannia?
Well, prior to the arrival of the Romans, this area of Cheshire was a natural corridor between the Pennines and North Wales and was steeped in resources, possessing rich agricultural land, extensive copper deposits, and 3 of the 4 inland brine springs of Britain, an important resource in commanding the salt industry. As Emperor Vespasian came to power in 69 AD, the peace treaty with the northern native tribe, the Brigantes, collapsed, so smelling a chance for a way to cement his rule and new dynasty with a great military victory, Vespasian pushed forward with an expansion of Roman rule into northern and western Britain, with his ultimate goal to take the entire island. And right here on this bend of the River Dee lay the perfect strategic site for that, a natural harbour providing vital access to the sea, direct trade links with Ireland, and a location that drove a wedge between the Brigantes and the ever-troublesome Welsh Ordovices tribe. So on this sandstone ridge on the northwest tip of the Roman Empire was built a fortress of great importance, not just in the governance of Roman Britain, but also in establishing military rule in the northwest, and if rumours of their ambitions to be believed, the foothold for the planned invasion of Ireland.
Today, Chester is described as one of England's most attractive cities, famous for its unique architecture and rich heritage, but Chester really wouldn't be where it is today without the Romans. So let's see what remains of this once great fortress.
Can you imagine this street almost 2,000 years ago? This is the Via Principalis, known today as Eastgate Street, the main street and thoroughfare of the Roman fortress here at Chester. In Roman times, and quite similar to today with Chester's famous rows, either side of this street would have been bordered by covered walkways of either wooden verandas or stone porticos.
Hello, I'm Katie, or Helpful History Online. I'm so excited to be back with Roman Found today, exploring Roman Chester. I'm most excited to see Minerva's shrine, because she's one of my favourite Roman goddesses, but more on that later.
So how much of Chester's city walls today are Roman?
After the Romans' abandonment, the city found itself refounded as a burh by the Anglo-Saxons in the 10th century, a stronghold against the Viking raids, so the Roman walls were repaired and enlarged. After the Norman conquest, the city became one of the most important medieval ports on the west coast, and the wall circuit was extended to the west and south. The outbreak of the English Civil War once again saw the walls fortified and repaired as the city found itself under siege. By the 18th century, many cities and towns were pulling down their defences, but here in Chester, paving stones were laid down instead. The walls turned into the walkway and promenade they remain today, a 2-mile walk around the city, albeit only on the eastern and northern circuit will you be walking on the line of the original Roman wall.
So Chester is the only city that retains its complete circuit of city walls. And from this stretch here, from King Charles Tower to Northgate Street, we are not just walking on Roman foundations, but 15 feet of surviving masonry.
In 1883, a considerable section of the inner face of the city wall west of Northgate collapsed, revealing one of the most important collections of Roman inscriptions and sculptures in northwest Europe. These are Roman gravestones that were actually used in a future repair over 1,500 years ago by the 4th century Roman builders who robbed a nearby cemetery that dated from the founding of the fortress itself to prop up a Roman wall. Preserved with incredibly crisp inscriptions, these tombstones reflect the incredible diversity of the Roman army and Roman Britain of this period, even revealing crucial historical evidence of particular ethnicities, such as the little known about Samaritan cavalrymen drafted from southern Ukraine.
Does anything strike you as unusual about this Roman wall?
Here at Chester, its distinctive red sandstone walls were first built around 100 AD. They averaged 4.5 feet thick and were far from a regular defensive wall, built in a manner normally reserved for structures of special political and religious significance. You can clearly see the technique known as opus quadratum, with its large blocks of stone laid in regular courses without any bonding material, a highly skilled and laborious process. In fact, this Roman wall has been entirely embellished. It has a projecting chamfered plinth at the base, an unusually elaborate moulded cornice at the parapet walk level, and it was even believed to have been adorned with coping stones carved with the image of a bearded deity. Surely such a wall was not constructed merely for defence, but instead as a demonstration of power and prestige.
So this is the Roman one. And then it actually follows the inner ring road.
Off the walls and walking down Northgate Street, the Via Decumana of Roman times, we find ourselves heading into the heart of Chester, straight towards the Town Hall and the Tourist Information Centre, a central location that would have housed the Principia, the main headquarters building and the administrative and religious focus of the Roman fortress.
Behind the town hall, in the site of the marketplace, lies one of the greatest mysteries of Roman Chester. Sadly, nothing remains here to see of this enigma, apart from a cheeky boar, but what once stood was an elliptical building, a construction that has no parallel to any other in the entire Roman Empire. Historians still debate today about this building's purpose and use. It took centuries to be completed. Inside were 12 rooms of equal size, surrounding a central elliptical courtyard and a fountain, and not one single clue as to the reason for its construction. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments below.
Outside the town hall you can find a small display of Roman columns and relics that were erected in 1981 to commemorate a prize given to the city for preserving its historic monuments. Even though it might look like it's just been plonked here, I think it's quite cool having a column that's reminiscent of the ancient town on display for everyone in the modern town.
The Principia would have contained 3 basic components: a large open courtyard that functioned for meetings and parades, surrounded on 3 sides by offices and stores. At the rear of this courtyard lay the basilica, an aisled hall containing altars and statues where the legate would give addresses and imperial decrees. And then there would have been a range of rooms at the back: the records office, the offices of the standard bearers, and a central room that was of the utmost importance and still remains to be found to this day, if you know where to look.
Hidden down this alley next to the Dublin Packet pub is the spiritual heart of the Roman fortress here at Chester, the legionary shrine known as the Aedes, which would have housed the legion's sacred standards and have been guarded day and night.
Much like it is presented today, the front of the Aedes would have been open so that the standards, the focus of the religious attention alongside the images of the emperor and the imperial family, were always visible. It also would have been raised higher than the rest of the rooms to further emphasise its importance. Inside you can also find the legion's treasury below, a room known as an aerarium. This strong room was cut into solid rock 6 feet below the ordinary floor level and was used to house the soldiers' pay chests and other valuables. It was quite commonplace for the Aedes and the aerarium to be built entirely out of stone, even when the Principia itself was initially constructed out of timber, a way of protecting the legion's most sacred in the event of a fire. Named Deva after the native name for the river upon which this fortress was built, life here would have been far more than just your average army camp. For starters, it was a good 20% larger than any other Roman fortress in Britain. It was first founded under the 2nd Legion Attribution, and then garrisoned by one of the oldest regiments in the Roman army, the 20th Legion Deva Victrix. For more than 3 centuries, it was one of the most important military bases in the Roman Empire. But what would life really have been like inside Deva?
To find out, we've been invited behind the scenes at Deva Roman Experience, a hands-on and interactive experience of Roman life inside Britain's largest Roman fortress. Run by actor-led encounters, visitors can explore a market street, bathhouse, and even experience a gladiator fight inside an amphitheatre.
We're here at the Deva Roman Experience.
Let's see if they'll let us in.
You heard him. Open the gates.
The experience is so much fun. During the show you really do feel like a Roman sailing over to become an ancient Britain. And getting a chance to film on set was amazing.
Wherever you dig here in Chester, you're bound to stumble across a piece of Roman history. And during the excavation here at Deva Roman Experience, they found this Roman wall.
2,000 years ago, underneath the Deva Roman Experience Discovery Centre was a Roman building. Lying next to the main bathhouse, it is suggested that this would have been the hospital for the fortress. In excavations here at Deva, they have found fragments of this building, from walls to unusual circular stone well forms, all left excavated and on display, showing the archaeological layers and centuries of history built directly on top of the Roman remains. This is all presented alongside the immersive sets and experiences aimed at bringing the history of Deva out from behind the glass.
Leaving Deva, we take a quick stop to admire the Roman medical garden before heading to our next site.
Before we get to our next site, why not like and subscribe and support our channel?
Can you believe that this is not just the oldest racecourse in Britain, but also a Roman harbour?
So welcome to Chester Racecourse, but in Roman times we probably would have been underwater, as this was the site of the Roman harbour. The River Dee would have flowed straight through here, and there's even part of the original Roman harbour wall just behind me.
This is the Rue Dee, where the first horse races were held right back in 1539. But go back a little further, back before the river silted up this area in the Middle Ages, and you'd find a tidal salt marsh that was actually one of the main reasons for the creation of the Roman fortress here at Chester, a natural harbour, and soon to be incredibly busy Roman port and naval base. In Roman times, the silting that eventually destroyed what was the busiest port on the west coast of Britain and created this very racecourse was already present, and the tidal range of the river created treacherous marshes and flats. So how did the Romans offload all of their cargo? Well, in 1885, during construction work, the ancient riverbed was discovered 17 feet down. Only that wasn't all they found, as they also recovered a collection of worked timbers, similar to the oak piles that had already been found a few years earlier around Watergate. These were concluded to be pieces of a huge Roman jetty and pier that ran 350 metres long and extended into the Rue Dee basin, allowing cargo ships to be unloaded no matter the tidal conditions.
Transporting supplies by sea cost a 20th of transporting them by land. It was meant to be the cheapest, easiest and safest way in the Roman world, but it didn't come without its perils. One of the Chester tombstones recovered from the Roman wars commemorates an Oppio, name unknown, serving in the century of Licinius and Genus. He had just been promoted to the rank of centurion when he perished in a shipwreck. On his tomb, the stonemason left out the H in HSE, the Roman version of "his body lies here," in case his body was ever recovered. Yet the H was never filled in.
It It is still debated just what the purpose of this Roman wall is. Some believe it was a more permanent replacement for the timber jetty. Others believe it was built as a defence for the civil settlement that was growing up in the sprawl of the Roman fortress. But what we do know is that it would have stood up to a height of 30 feet or more and ran for at least 250 metres long. A substantial, sheer and daunting wall to come across, that's for sure. Right here at the lowest point of the D was the perfect point for a river crossing, and the Roman bridge that stood here prior to this medieval one created a crucial link in the chain of military communication right from Caerleon all the way to York.
The River Dee was one of the main reasons for the Romans' decision to build Britain's largest Roman fortress here. The transportation it offered was invaluable, and 2,000 years ago these channels would have been filled with ships carrying wine, olive oil, fish sauce, Samianware, grain, copper, lead, and the odd legionary ship checking on auxiliary forts.
Found next to the ship-in over the Old Dee Bridge in Chester, Edgar's Field might seem like nothing more than your average public park, but carved into the surface of that outcrop of rock is a Roman relic unlike any other in Britain.
This is the outline of the Roman goddess Minerva, and it's the only rock-cut shrine in Western Europe that remains in its original location.
This 2nd century carving may be worn, but this shrine has stood here for nearly 2,000 years, depicting the goddess Minerva standing tall, holding a shield in one hand, a spear in the other, with an owl perched on her shoulder. Her survival to this day is a rare and remarkable feat that is believed to be the case of a mistaken identity, mistook for the Virgin Mary in the Middle Ages. Now surrounded by a protective stone frame that was added in the 19th century, she still receives offerings and wishes from local passers-by. This outcrop of rock is actually an old sandstone quarry that once stood beside the route of the main Roman road into the fortress of Deva from the south. As the patroness of crafts, it is very appropriate that Minerva was carved in a quarry, watching over the stonemasons and quarrymen as they bored out huge sandstone blocks to build Chester's Roman fortress.
This is what I have been most looking forward to, and being able to actually leave an offering to the goddess Minerva felt really special.
This site is the furthest from the city centre, but it's well worth the walk. Back in the city walls, we are now at the heart of the Roman fortress.
This city owes much of its current layout to the original Roman surveyors, and the routes of the 4 main streets even still survive to this very day, practically unchanged on the map, despite the passage of almost 2,000 years.
This column marks the centre of Chester, and in summer you can find a town crier here making public announcements, a tradition that goes right back to the medieval era, when most people couldn't read or write.
While this cross may not be Roman, it does stand on the original junction of the 4 main roads of Chester,
which today are known as Bridge Street, Watergate Street, Eastgate Street and Northgate Street, and would have led to the 4 main gates of the fortress.
Many of these streets we've already been on: the Via Decumana of Northgate Street, the Roman road that led to the rear of the fortress, the Via Principia of Eastgate and Watergate Street, the main thoroughfare through Deva, and now we will head down the Via Praetoria, known today as Bridge Street, the most prestigious Roman road that led directly to the headquarters building itself.
Heading into the rows, these buildings aren't just one of Britain's most unusual shopping experiences. They are also entirely unique to Chester. But why were they built like this?
It is believed that the real reason for this architectural phenomenon began to develop around the 13th century as a result of the Roman ruins of Deva. You see, much of the stonework of the Roman fortress was still cluttering the streets, so instead of wasting time clearing the majority of the rubble, the medieval builders simply cleared the main streets and then built on top of the rest. There were also restrictions in space set out by the Roman walls. At this time, Chester was under threat by the Welsh raiders, and the walls were a crucial part of defence. So in order to maximise the available space and the profit, traders built upwards, creating 2 streets that took up the space of one.
Today you can find pubs, independent shops, restaurants and cafes inside Chester's Rows, one of which we'll be visiting next.
So while on Bridge Street, it's worth keeping an eye out for all the little signs. We've just spotted one on this cafe which says "Come and see our Roman remains." So let's see what they've got.
This is Bridge Cafe and Bistro in Chester, and it might look like your average cafe, but enter down into the cellar and you will discover why this building reserves a spot on England's National Heritage Grade 1 list.
In the downstairs seating area, through this narrow opening, is a piece of one of the largest buildings of the Roman fortress, the Thermae, the main bathhouse.
So an amazing basement find is this Roman hypocaust that was found in the 1720s and has been preserved here in Bridge Street ever since.
These close-spaced pillars made out of local sandstone were crucial in the Romans' revolutionary technique of underfloor heating, raising up the floor level to create an open chamber below. In special rooms such as the tepidarium and caldarium, a continuous lining of hollow box bricks, known as tubuli, were added to extend this chamber and encircle the room. Huge furnaces would have provided the hot gases that were drawn through the hypocaust and up the tubuli, warming the floor, walls and ceiling. If you ever wondered how the Romans created a sauna, this was it. The Thermae would have contained 2 suites of baths, all equipped with hypocaust heating and mosaic floors. A huge part of everyday life, these baths not only ensured good hygiene for the Roman troops and prevented the risk of disease and infection, but also created an important social centre to relax, gossip and bathe.
The discovery of this Roman hypocaust in the 1720s was an important milestone in the early uncovering of Chester's Roman past, as it was one of the first Roman remains to be preserved and left in situ, as recorded in a contemporary guidebook which states, "The proprietors, with the antiquarian zeal and true public spirit which have ever distinguished them, took especial precautions to preserve, both from injury and molestation, this curious relic of proud old Rome."
There have been plenty of excavations over the course of discovering Roman Chester, and you don't have to visit the museum to see all of them. Heading around the corner from Bridge Street, our next site is pretty unusual. Have you ever visited a garden made out of Roman ruins?
Welcome to Chester Roman Gardens. Found off Pepper Street, this archaeological oasis is filled with Roman artefacts discovered during 19th century excavations in the city. Built in 1949 by Charles Greenwood and Graham Webster, this project was created as part of the Festival of Britain as a celebration of British heritage, designed to raise the spirits of a nation emerging from World War. The fragments that you see around us come from some of the most important buildings of the Roman fortress, from the reconstructed hypocaust and columns of the main bathhouse to the largest column, which is actually from the assembly hall of the legionary headquarters itself. There's coping stones that once would have adorned the fortress wall, and even a reconstructed mosaic.
Does this hypocaust look familiar? This is actually a much larger section of what we have just seen in Bridge Street. You see, when the previous building that stood in the rows next to what became Bridge Street Cafe and Bistro, the Feathers Inn, was demolished and rebuilt in the 1860s to make way for St Michael's Arcade. They unearthed a further huge section of the Thermae. Thankfully, instead of destroying these precious remains, they were carefully removed and relocated, first on display in the Water Tower Gardens, before being transferred and reconstructed here during the new creation of the Roman Gardens.
The Romans were really spoiled here at Chester with the easy availability of sandstone, like from the local quarry at Edgar's Field, which meant they could indulge in architectural ornamentation, creating this large variety of decorative cornices and architrave blocks, like these found in this garden. Many of these were recovered from the city wall, where they had been used in later repairs, but at its height, Deva must have been a classical sight to behold.
Britain's largest Roman amphitheatre is just over there, but we have an important piece of the fortress to show you first.
The encircling walls of a Roman fortress would have been an imposing sight to oncomers, but they weren't just there for intimidation alone. Around the walls would be a number of towers set for lookout and defence. Here on Little St John Street at Chester is one of them, the southeast angle tower. There would have been 22 separate interval towers around the Roman walls, with each corner dominated by this larger angle tower. This tower would have been roofed at walkway level, with either an open lookout platform or another roof chamber above. It would have provided important cover for sentry patrols, as well as space for weapons storage, and of course each would have housed a ballistae capable of hurling a 60-pound weight up to 500 yards, more than enough to ward off any potential enemy.
Welcome to the largest Roman amphitheatre in Britain.
In 1929, the discovery of a curved Roman wall on this site prompted an international public campaign.
Since its founding in 1849, the Chester Archaeological Society found itself facing its most important mission yet, saving Chester's amphitheatre. The City Corporation planned to lay a new bypass road directly over the estimated centre of the arena, and in 1932 the Society was given just 3 months to raise at least $8,000 to divert the road, alongside a possible further $8,000 to purchase the properties on the site and plan an excavation. What followed was one of the most successful publicity campaigns of the time, seeing the support of the then Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald and international funds coming in from America. The road was diverted as you can see it today, and excavations finally began in 1960, after being put on hold for the Second World War. By 1972, the northern half of the amphitheatre had been excavated and the site was open to the public, after being generously donated to the nation by the Chester Archaeological Society, who saved it. This amphitheatre was first constructed in stone in the 1st century and enlarged around 200 AD. It would have been able to seat between 8,000 and 12,000 spectators. These crowds gathered on the wooden seats and would have enjoyed a range of entertainment, from cockfighting, bull baiting and of course gladiatorial combat. The arena wall still survives to this day. Step inside and you can almost imagine the roar of the crowds who would have gathered from all over Roman Britain.
Your gladiatorial fight wouldn't have been successful without first a visit to the gods, and here at Chester's Roman amphitheatre, a shrine to Nemesis, the goddess of retribution and fate, stood at the north entrance to the arena, ready to receive the offerings of those preparing themselves for combat. This room would have been rendered in an orange-painted plaster and contained an altar and 2 column bases that would have supported dedications and offerings. It wasn't unusual to find a shrine to Nemesis inside an amphitheatre, but normally they would have been placed close to the outer wall for the spectators, not the arena wall, suggesting that this shrine was placed solely for the use of the gladiators.
So Deva, Britain's largest Roman fortress, home to the largest amphitheatre in Britain, a mysterious building unlike any other in the Roman Empire, and an unusually ornate fortress wall. Do you think this grand Roman site is merely another Roman fortress?
It's been heavily discussed that this settlement right here on the very northwest tip of the Roman Empire was actually intended to be the capital of Roman Britain, built in extravagance in preparation for the residence of the provincial governor, and part of a wider imperial plan to expand Britannia, being perfectly placed for an invasion of Ireland with a port to control the west. The amphitheatre, the wall, the scale of the fortress, the elliptical building, these were all planned right from the very beginning, and the ruins and locations that remain to be found to this day tell a tale of might and ambition, but also the melancholy of a wider dream that was never quite grasped. But what has been your favourite location on our tour?
We want to say a huge thank you to Katie of Helpful History for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me back. I had such a great day with you both in Chester. Like I said, it was great to see the Minerva Shrine, and the amphitheatre was lots of fun as we tried to get those overhead shots. And maybe next time we do a Roman tour of Hadrian's Wall, but that might take a bit of training.
If you've loved exploring the story of Chester with us, then why not join us in another Roman tour?
Thanks for watching.